You're reading this right now. You know that, right? But here's the question that kept Richard Feynman up at night. Where exactly is the you that's doing the reading? Point to it. Go ahead. Point to where your mind is. You probably pointed to your head, didn't you? Most people do. But here's where things get weird, really weird, because when Feynman and other scientists actually went looking for the mind, for that thing we call consciousness, for the you that experiences life, they found something so strange, so deeply unsettling, that it challenges everything we think we know about ourselves. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me tell you a story. It's 1962, and there's a patient in a hospital. Let's call him Paul. Paul has severe epilepsy, seizures so bad that doctors decide to do something radical. They're going to cut his corpus callosum. That's the big bundle of nerves connecting the two halves of his brain. Think of it like cutting the bridge between two islands. The hope is that if a seizure starts on one side, it won't spread to the other. The surgery works for the epilepsy, and Paul goes home. Everything seems fine. He can walk, talk, recognize his family. He's still Paul. Or is he? A few months later, researchers start testing Paul. They show him pictures, but here's the trick. They show the picture only to his left eye, which connects to the right side of his brain. They show him a picture of a spoon. What do you see? They ask. Nothing, Paul says. I don't see anything. But then they say, okay, reach behind this screen with your left hand and pick up what you saw. And Paul's left hand, controlled by his right brain, reaches out and grabs a spoon. Paul himself is confused. His mouth, controlled by the left brain, has no idea why his hand just did that. Why did you pick up the spoon? They ask. And Paul, trying to make sense of it, makes up a reason. He confabulates. Oh, I just thought I needed to stir my coffee. Wait, stop. Think about what just happened. There are two conscious entities in Paul's head, two separate observers. One knows about the spoon, one doesn't, and they can't talk to each other anymore. So here's the disturbing question. Before the surgery, when the bridge was intact, was Paul one person or two people sharing information really fast? And after the surgery, is Paul one person who lost some abilities, or is he two people who can't coordinate anymore? This is what Feynman called one of the most profound mysteries in all of science. Where is the mind? Is it in the left brain, the right brain, both? And if it's both, are you actually two minds that just happen to work together? Are you a democracy of neurons voting on every decision, but there's an illusion of a single you experiencing it all? Let's go deeper. Let's talk about what the mind actually is. You probably think of your mind as this unified thing, right? Like there's a little observer sitting somewhere behind your eyes, watching the world, making decisions, being you. Philosophers call this the Cartesian theater, named after Descartes, who famously said, I think, therefore I am. Descartes imagined consciousness as a kind of theater where all your experiences are projected and there's a little you sitting in the audience watching. But here's the problem. When neuroscientists go looking for that theater, for that central observer, they can't find it. It's not there. The brain doesn't work like that at all. Your brain is more like a city than a theater. Imagine a city with millions of inhabitants. Each citizen is doing their own thing, following simple rules, communicating with neighbors, but there's no mayor actually running everything from City Hall. The city just emerges from all these interactions. Traffic flows, garbage gets collected, the economy functions, but there's no single place where the city exists. The city is the pattern of all these interactions. Your mind is like that. Consciousness isn't located anywhere. It's a pattern that emerges from billions of neurons doing relatively simple things. But that sounds abstract. Let me make it concrete. Right now, as you're reading this, you think you're seeing these words all at once, right? You feel like you have this complete, unified visual experience of the text in front of you. But that's an illusion. Your eyes can only focus sharply on a tiny area at a time, about the size of your thumbnail at arm's length. Everything else is blurry.
Don't believe me? Try this. Look at a word in the middle of this sentence, but without moving your eyes, try to read a
word 3 words to the left. You can't. You can see there's a word there, but you can't actually read it without moving your eyes. So why does it feel like you see everything clearly all at once? Because your brain is lying to you. It's constructing a seamless experience from fragments, filling in the gaps, making you feel like you're seeing more than you actually are. The mind you experience is not a recording of reality. It's a construction, a very convincing hallucination. Feynman loved this stuff because it got at the heart of what science is really about, questioning everything, even things that seem obvious. He'd say, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. And nowhere is that more true than when it comes to your own mind. You think you know yourself. You think you're experiencing reality directly, but you're not. You're experiencing a simulation created by your brain, and that simulation is designed not for accuracy, but for survival. Let me give you another example that'll blow your mind. There's a blind spot in each of your eyes, right where the optic nerve connects. There are no light receptors there. It's a genuine hole in your vision about the size of a grapefruit if you held it at arm's length. But you've never noticed it, have you? That's because your brain doesn't show you a black spot. It doesn't leave a hole in your experience. Instead, it fills it in with what it predicts should be there based on the surrounding area. It's photoshopping reality in real time. Your visual experience right now is partly fabricated, made up, and you'd never know it if scientists hadn't figured it out. So if the ind isn't in one place, if it's not a unified observer, but more like an emergent pattern, then where does consciousness actually happen? This is where things get really strange. When you decide to move your hand, when you feel like you made a conscious choice to do it, scientists can detect electrical activity in your brain that predicts that movement up to several seconds before you're aware of making the decision. Several seconds. There's a researcher named Benjamin Libet who did these experiments. He'd have people sit in front of a clock and ask them to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, and to remember the exact time on the clock when they made the decision. Meanwhile, he's measuring their brain activity. What he found was that the brain starts preparing for the movement about half a second before the person reports being aware of deciding to move. Think about that. Your brain decides to move your hand, starts the process, and only then does consciousness show up and say, I decided to do that. Consciousness is like a narrator arriving late to the story but claiming credit for writing it. So are you even making decisions, or are you just becoming aware of decisions your brain already made? Are you the author of your actions, or just a witness claiming authorship? Now, Feynman didn't work on consciousness directly, but he was fascinated by these paradoxes. He understood that science often reveals reality to be stranger than we imagine. He worked on quantum mechanics, where particles can be in two places at once, where observation changes reality, where the universe seems to operate on rules that violate common sense. And he'd say that consciousness is probably the same. Our intuitions about it are probably wrong. The obvious answers are probably not true. Here's another disturbing piece of the puzzle: your memories. You think of memories as recordings, right? Like videos stored in your brain that you can replay. But that's not how memory works at all. Every time you remember something, you're not playing back a recording, you're reconstructing the memory from fragments, and in the process, you change it slightly. It's like if every time you watched a movie, the movie changed a little bit based on your mood and what else you'd been thinking about. Studies have shown that people can develop completely false memories that feel absolutely real. They can remember events that never happened, remember details that were suggested to them, and they'll swear these memories are true. They'll pass lie detector tests because they genuinely believe they're false memories. So the you that exists right now is based partly on memories that are reconstructions and partly on fabrications. The continuity of self that you feel, that sense that you're the same person you were yesterday and 10 years ago, is a story your brain tells. It's not necessarily false, but it's not a simple truth either. You're more like a pattern that persists over time, constantly changing but maintaining some core structure, like a river that's never the same water, but remains recognizably the same river. Let's talk about something even weirder. You know how when you think, you hear a voice in your head, right? That little narrator that comments on things, makes plans, argues with itself. Most people have that. But here's the question: who's talking and who's listening? If it's all you, why does it feel like a conversation? Some researchers think this internal voice is actually a remnant of how our brains developed language. We used language first to communicate with others, and then we internalized it. We started talking to ourselves. But the brain architecture still treats it somewhat like a conversation between two parties. There's evidence that when you think in words, the same brain areas light up as when you actually speak and listen, just at a lower intensity. You're essentially hallucinating a conversation with yourself, and that hallucination is a big part of what we call thinking. But not everyone has this inner voice. Some people report no internal monologue at all. They think in concepts, images, feelings, but not words. And they're just as intelligent, just as functional. So that voice in your head that feels so central to who you are, it's optional. Some people's minds work completely differently, and they'd struggle to understand what you mean when you talk about your inner voice. The mind that you have, the way you experience consciousness, is not universal. It's just one way a human mind can be configured. Now let's get to something Feynman did talk about, the observer effect in quantum mechanics. This is often misunderstood, but it's relevant here. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in a state of superposition, meaning they're kind of in multiple states at once, until they're observed, and then they collapse into one definite state. People sometimes take this to mean that consciousness creates reality, that the mind is somehow special and collapses wave functions. But that's not what physicists mean by observation. An observation in quantum mechanics just means any interaction that causes decoherence, which can be a particle hitting a detector or just interacting with other particles in the environment. Consciousness isn't required, but here's why it's still relevant to our question. It shows that the universe doesn't exist as definite, concrete things until something measures or interacts with them. Reality is, in a sense, relational. Things only have definite properties in relation to other things. And maybe consciousness is the same way. Maybe the mind doesn't exist as a thing in a location, but as a relationship, a pattern of information processing that only exists when neurons interact in certain ways. Like how a wave only exists as a relationship between water molecules, not as a thing itself. Feynman used to say, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. And maybe the same is true for consciousness. If you think you understand where your mind is, you probably don't. The more you look at it, the weirder it gets. Let me tell you about another experiment that'll make you question everything. There's something called the rubber hand illusion. You sit at a table with a rubber hand in front of you and your real hand hidden from view. A researcher strokes both the rubber hand and your real hand simultaneously with a paintbrush. After a few minutes of this synchronized stroking, something bizarre happens. You start to feel like the rubber hand is your hand. Your brain incorporates this foreign object into your body map. And if someone suddenly whacks the rubber hand with a hammer, you'll flinch and feel a jolt of panic, even though your real hand is fine. Your sense of your own body, which feels so certain and fundamental, is flexible. It's a construct that the brain builds based on sensory input, and it can be hacked with simple tricks. If the brain can be fooled about where your body is, what else is it being fooled about? What about your sense of having a unified self? What about the feeling that you're in control? These might be illusions too, useful fictions that the brain creates to help you navigate the world. After all, it's easier to plan and act if you feel like there's a single you making decisions, even if the reality underneath is millions of parallel processes competing and cooperating. Here's another thought experiment. Imagine we could take your brain and slowly, neuron by neuron, replace it with artificial neurons that function identically. We do one neuron. Are you still you? Of course. One neuron doesn't matter. We do 100 neurons. Still you, 1,000, 10,000. At what point do you stop being you? And if we replace all of them, and you still think and feel and remember exactly the same, are you still the same person? Or is that a new entity that just thinks it's you? This isn't just philosophy. People with brain damage can lose parts of their brain and still be recognizably themselves, just with some functions impaired. People who've had strokes, injuries, even entire hemispheres removed in rare medical cases can still be conscious, still have a sense of self, though diminished. The mind is robust to damage in weird ways. You can lose huge chunks and still be you, but sometimes tiny specific damage can completely change who you are. A small stroke, I And the right place can make you unable to recognize faces, or unable to feel that your left side of your body belongs to you, or unable to form new memories. The self is distributed across the brain in a way we still don't fully understand. Feynman had this wonderful way of being comfortable with not knowing. He'd say, I can live with doubt and uncertainty and not knowing. I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers that might be wrong. And when it comes to consciousness, we really don't know. We have pieces of the puzzle, strange experimental results, philosophical paradoxes, but no unified theory that explains what consciousness is, where it exists, or why it feels like something to be you. But here's what we do know. Consciousness is not a thing. It's a process. It's what it feels like from the inside when information is being processed in certain complex ways. When you're reading these words, there are neurons firing in patterns, electrical and chemical signals cascading through networks, and somehow mysteriously, all of that creates the experience of understanding, of meaning, of reading, the same physical stuff, atoms and molecules obeying the same laws of physics as everything else, but arranged in such a way that they give rise to subjective experience. And here's the really disturbing part. We don't know if we'll ever fully understand it. Some philosophers think consciousness might be fundamentally inexplicable, that there's an unbridgeable gap between the objective description of neurons firing and the subjective experience of being. Others think we just need better science, better tools, better theories. Feynman would probably say we shouldn't assume either way. We should just keep investigating and see what we find. One more thing that'll bake your noodle. Right now, you feel present, right? You feel like you exist in this moment, reading this, experiencing now. But neuroscience tells us that what you experience as now is actually the recent past. It takes time for signals to travel from your senses to your brain, time for your brain to process them, time to integrate them into a coherent experience. By the time you're conscious of seeing something, it happened about 80 milliseconds ago. You're always living slightly in the past. Your consciousness is like watching a live TV broadcast that's on a slight delay. The universe is always a tiny bit ahead of your experience of it, and your brain does even weirder things to maintain the illusion of a smooth present. If you move your eyes quickly from one point to another, which you do several times a second, you should see a blur, right? But you don't. Your brain edits it out. It literally suppresses vision during eye movements and stitches together the before and after into a seamless experience. Time itself, as you experience it, is not uniform. Your brain stretches and compresses it, edits it, presents you with a director's cut of reality, not the raw footage. So when you ask, where does my mind exist? The answer is, it doesn't exist in space the way a chair or a brain exists in space. It exists in time as a temporal pattern. It exists in the relationships between neurons. It exists in the information being processed. It's like asking where the economy exists. Is it in banks, in computers, in people's wallets? It's all of those and none of those. The economy is a pattern of interactions, and so is the mind. Feynman once said, the thing that doesn't fit is the thing that's most interesting, and consciousness is the thing that doesn't fit. It's the hardest problem in science. It's the mystery at the center of your existence. You can study physics and understand how stars work, how galaxies form, how the universe began. You can study biology and understand how life evolves, how cells function, how bodies work. But you, the thing experiencing all of this, the thing reading these words right now, that remains profoundly mysterious. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's beautiful even. You are the universe looking at itself, trying to understand itself, and finding that the deepest part of that understanding is realizing how much you don't know. You're a pattern of atoms that became complex enough to wonder about its own existence. You're star stuff that became conscious. And where that consciousness exists, where you truly are, might not be a question with a simple answer. The next time someone asks you where your mind is, you could point to your head. That's where the brain is, after all, and the brain is necessary for the mind. But it's not the whole story. Your mind extends into your environment through your senses. It extends into the past through your memories and into the future through your anticipations. It exists in the present moment that you're constantly constructing. It's distributed across billions of neurons with no central command center. It's an emergent property of complexity. It's a process, not a place. And the you that's been reading this, that's been thinking about these ideas, es is not a fixed thing. It's a verb, not a noun. You're not being, you're happening. You're a pattern that the universe is doing right now, and it's doing it in a way that allows that pattern to be aware of itself, to question itself, to wonder about itself. That's consciousness. That's the mystery. That's you. Feynman discovered a lot of things in his career, won a Nobel Prize, changed physics. But when it came to consciousness, he knew he was facing something fundamentally different from anything else in science. It's the only phenomenon we know of that has an inside and an outside that's both the observer and the observed. And that's what makes it so disturbing, so fascinating, and so utterly strange. So where does your mind exist? Everywhere and nowhere, in your neurons and beyond them, in this moment and in the pattern that persists across moments. The question itself might be the wrong question, based on wrong assumptions about what minds are. But asking it, thinking about it, feeling the vertigo of realizing you don't really know where or what you are, that's part of what makes you human. That's part of what makes this mysterious thing we call consciousness so worth investigating, even if we never fully solve it. And here you are, at the end of this, probably with more questions than answers. Good. That means you're thinking. That means the pattern that is you is doing what it does best, wondering, questioning, seeking understanding. Wherever your mind is, whatever it is, it's doing something remarkable right now. It's being aware that it's aware. And that, Feynman would say, is the most disturbing and wonderful discovery of all.